Okay, so I don't need to go out.
توني شامية الحرة خريف.
Like you, we are here to tell you about our oppression and abuse. Both Palestinians and Jews, we share the same views that to identify there is no excuse. Put yourself in our shoes because it's up to you to choose. Do you want the truth or the lie that you are used to? Since 1948, when Israel genocided its way to escape apartheid and hate, claiming to love the land that they desecrate. They expelled and massacred the Palestinians, and still to date, terror over all they create. They control our medicine, energy, water, and food intake. At their own will, they shut it all off and dictate. How would you feel in that place? They tell us that Palestinians are with animals to his way, so that you away and take the bait, allowing this genocide to continue until it's too late. When will we stop this crime against humanity? When will we ever relate? For 76 years, Palestinians have been executed, persecuted, for the crimes of an anti-Semitic Europe prosecuted. Our olive trees uprooted, our water polluted, our land looted, our rich history intentionally diluted, colonized and substituted, our massacres for decades, till today, muted, and our voices muted. As our colonizers concluded that from our own land we ought to be excluded. For 7 months and 76 years, they've ignored our chants and screamed about the Israeli genocidal regime as the Dutch government continues to support their bloodthirsty. 4 Palestinian generations under brutal military occupation. And our government and media still uphold the violence, lies, innovation, manipulation in this war of information, calling ethnic cleansing voluntary migration, genocide by bombs, snipers, lack of medication, dehydration, starvation, according to the Zionist declaration, empty promises of ceasefire and bringing of mediation, while Palestinians face their ongoing annihilation. They call us names to scare us and break our determination, when for the crime of genocide there is absolutely no justification. The Dutch government is supporting a genocide. To a genocidal regime, they have become a blindly loyal ally. They're sending them F-35 fighting machines and glorify the killing of tens of thousands of innocents in Palestine, claiming that the numbers are unspecified. But they're leaving their own claims unverified when they cut off the lifeline to UNRWA for the refugees left behind. The children left paralyzed and horrified, bodies left unidentified. They shall be unified, simultaneously continuing to dehumanize the Palestinians to stand by their capitalistic allies' side. A genocide they're trying to hide, then they vilified those who resisted. They bombed more innocent for the livelihood of their economy, and more in time, rather than stopping this genocide. A genocide according to the ICJ, televised and live day by day. As our people agonize, our government embassy briefings remain classified, but we know what they specified. Or that they had to modify to justify the occupation army that they fortified, so that they continue to slowly terrorize, and with their speeches they lie and imply that everything is fine as long as we abide, that everything to Israel they supply, that international law complied, as if we don't see Palestinian children's trials up, and their insides blown outside.
انسحاب القوات الإسرائيلية لأننا نعلم تماما بأن هذه الجلسة هي واحدة من 4 جلسات حتى الآن طالما فيها الإسرائيلية بفرض إجراءات تقليدية على إسرائيل وليس من أجل أن توافق المحكمة على طلب.
We shouldn't mind that they blatantly support apartheid, and then we should just comply as long as they continue to think they can decide when and to whom international law should be applied. In the Netherlands, we are accused of anti-Semitism for rejecting and resisting Western colonialism, after condemning not even but hating the ideology that is Zionism, as we see their Western imperialism, saying that Israel is a democracy when it's based on Zionism in the name of fighting terrorism, but here is defining terrorism. Is it not the Zionist entity eradicating our identity? Is it not the intensity in which they bomb the strip of 2.3 million civilians in density? Is it not the extremity that creates apartheid and disparity? Which other country security and impunity to keep their ethnic and religious purity. Dear Western citizens, your government are the ones to create my oppression that is going to wage you speak for me as a woman who wants to live the ways of what I'm born. Your government is the one that wants to dominate. They facilitate our people's ethnic cleansing. And here is going to eliminate 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza alone. And it's going to be to voluntary migrate. Then they bring us the people of integration to the people in heavily indoctrinated who cheer at situations then they say we come from war zones and rehabilitate. The same wars that they escalate, in reality they just want to separate us from our rich culture that they seek to obliterate and demand that we look away and accept our faith as they collaborate to integrate their war machine and invade by pretending to mitigate. Their false propaganda, they're unable to prove nor corroborate. Their missiles do not discriminate. The bodies of our martyrs they cannot even refrigerate as they try to defecate the Palestinian population from their own land and limit their birth rate. Let me reiterate and please allow this to resonate. This is a genocide and all our leaders no more than you anticipate. Please refuse to participate in this injustice that they originate. You've been told that someone is told this government's foreign policy and the habit that they impose. They convince you that this theocracy, defined by a government under the control of a state religion, is in the Middle East the only democracy. But this cannot be by definition when one people are prepared over the lives of the indigenous. What is hypocrisy? They silence us on social media, our jobs, and even cinematography. They murder our children, doctors, journalists, and forbid international language and photography. These are rights given supporting the colonizers who vowed publicly to change Palestine's demography. Promising of a temporary ceasefire is genocide with an apostrophe. Speaking of against genocide is once again silent because of its sensitivity when after 18 years we have learned nothing about protecting an ethnicity. They are counting on our passivity, threatening them to speak out with their vulnerability, to continue their duplicity without giving context nor validity. They want to place our flag in its affinity to increase their profitability of the gas, oil, and weapons industry, banking on the Middle East instability and questioning our border credibility. While they are causing mass brutality, they try to hide the Israelis in war crimes and severity. We all live the same as they could in cold blood and brutality. But we refuse to live under their totality, with their support of the Israeli regime and its criminality, while pretending to liberate my sexuality. When you ask all of us to slaughter our ethnicity, claiming LGBTQ rights and feminism, but then condemning our anti-genocide activism, while they practice their classism, apologists for irrationalism. These are the same politicians that don't care about any of us humans anywhere. The same ones that convince you your children deserve to live, but killing ours is fair. The same ones that declare a war while we, its citizens, sit unaware, ignoring our protests at every square, saying we are aggressive and anti-Semitic, to leave you in constant fear and despair, warning you that outside of Europe humanity is rare. Be thankful, they tell you, for you are the Israelites. Focus on your carbon emissions while they drop 2,000-pound bombs on a people they deem less civilized. Citizens are under concentration. Camps of refugees being bombed is an attempt of extermination. Our government is calling a genocide a military operation, while Palestine is left in total devastation and deprivation. And they protect the Israeli war criminal from implications. If our government can stop funding Underwa because of the Israeli allegations, why can't they stop funding Israel because of the International Court of Justice genocide investigation? We have exposed their motivation, and their form of intimidation no longer works. We see clearly in the terrorist organization. 7 months for a ceasefire we fled. Now we see Palestinians struggling to keep their families fed, with snipers pointing guns at their heads, trying to cut flour for bread. We fear for those who who fled, and mourn those to death who bled, and instead they spread lies about us and our families to justify 40,000 civilians dead. We are all human, we are all Palestinians. Liberation is our aim. They all have rules, they all have names. We are not pawns in your geopolitical game. We shed blood and tears of pain, being slaughtered while you say never again. Call terrorists and condemn to forever explain, to constantly prove our humanity, and from our anger at all times to refrain, when the Netherlands in a ceasefire vote say, I abstain. We are all human, we are all Palestinians. We hear of human rights, but we see nothing humane. For your future children and grandchildren stand on the right side of history. Every genocide everywhere is our responsibility. Free Palestine and Dutch complicity.
سامح؟ انت مشيت في الكويت.
نعم.
Well, I still don't know. I know we have around 15 people, but I haven't seen the list yet. So maybe a little bit less than last time because it's holiday. But I hope. Well, I hope to see you on that next one. You have Instagram. I sent you the flyer because on the flyers there are the four dates. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Please be seated. The sitting is open. The court meets today to deliver its open court its decision on the request for the modification of the order of March 28, 2024, regarding provisional measures submitted by South Africa on May 10, 2024, in the case concerning application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip, South Africa versus Israel. For reasons made known to me, Judges Abraham, Shwe, and Iwasawa, who duly participated in the deliberation and the final vote, are not in a position to take their seat on the bench today. Judge ad hoc Barak, who also duly participated in the deliberations and the final vote, is unable to join us today for family reasons. I recall that on December 29, 2023, South Africa filed in the registry of the court an application instituting proceedings against Israel concerning alleged violations in the Gaza Strip of obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, to which I shall refer as the Genocide Convention. The application of South Africa contained a request for the indication of provisional measures. After hearing the parties, the court indicated certain provisional measures by an order issued on January 26, 2024. By a letter dated February 12, 2024, South Africa, referring to, I quote, the developing circumstances in Rafah, end of quote, called upon the court urgently to exercise its power under Article 75, Paragraph 1 of the Rules of Court. The registrar informed the parties of court's decision in response to that communication by letter on 16 February 2024. On March 6, 2024, South Africa requested the court, I quote, to indicate further provisional measures and or to modify its provisional measures indicated on January 26, 2024. By an order of March 28, 2024, the court reaffirmed the provisional measures indicated in its order of January 26, 2024, and indicated certain additional provisional measures. On May 10, 2024, South Africa submitted to the court what it described as an urgent request for the modification and indication of provisional measures, pursuant to Article 41 of the statute and Articles 75 and 76 of the Rules of Court. In accordance with usual practice, I shall not read the introductory paragraphs of the order, which set out the procedural history of the case. I shall also omit or summarize some other paragraphs. I shall therefore begin by reading the order at paragraph 20. The court begins by noting that, in its view, South Africa's present request is a request for the modification of the order of March 28, 2024. For this reason, the court must determine whether the conditions set forth in Article 76, Paragraph 1 of the Rules of Court have been fulfilled. That paragraph reads as follows, I quote, at the request of a party or proprio motu, the court may, at any time before the final judgment in the case, revoke or modify any decision concerning provisional measures if, in its opinion, some change in the situation justifies such revocation or modification, end of quote. The court must first ascertain whether, taking into account the information that the parties have provided with respect to the current situation, there is reason to conclude that the situation that warranted the decision set out in its order of March 28, 2024, has changed since that time. If the court finds that there was a change in the situation since the delivery of its earlier order, it will then have to consider whether such a change justifies a modification of its earlier decision concerning provisional measures. Any such modification would be appropriate only if the general conditions laid down in Article 41 of the Statute of the Court were also met in this instance. The Court thus begins by determining whether there has been a change in the situation that warranted the decision set out in its order of March 28, 2024. The Court recalls that in its order of January 26, 2024, it noted that the military operation conducted by Israel following the attack of October 7, 2023, had resulted in, I quote, a large number of deaths and injuries, as well as the massive destruction of homes, the forcible displacement of the vast majority of the population, and extensive damage to civilian infrastructure. End of quote. In its decision communicated to the parties by letters of 16 February 2024, the Court noted, quoting the United Nations Secretary General, that the developments in the Gaza Strip and Rafah in particular, I quote, would exponentially increase what was already a humanitarian nightmare with untold regional consequences. End of quote. The Court further records that in its order of March 28, 2024, it observed with regret that the catastrophic living conditions of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip had deteriorated further since January 2024, especially in view of the prolonged and widespread deprivation of food and other basic necessities to which the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip had been subjected. In the present order, the Court notes that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, which, as stated in its order of January 26, 2024, was at serious risk of deteriorating, has deteriorated, and has done so even further since the Court adopted its order of March 28, 2024. In this regard, the Court observes that the concern that it expressed in its decision communicated to the parties on February 16, 2024, with respect to the developments in Rafah have materialized, and that the humanitarian situation is now to be characterized as disastrous. After weeks of intensification of military bombardments of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians had fled as a result of Israeli evacuation orders, covering more than 3/4 of Gaza's entire territory, on May 6, 2024, nearly 100,000 Palestinians were ordered by Israel to evacuate the eastern portion of Rafah and relocate to Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis areas ahead of a planned military offensive. The military ground offensive in Rafah, which Israel started on May 7, 2024, is still ongoing and has led to new evacuation orders. As a result, according to United Nations reports, nearly 800,000 people have been displaced from Rafah as at May 18, 2024. The Court considered that the aforementioned developments, which are exceptionally grave, in particular the military offensive in Rafah and the resulting repeated large-scale displacement of already extremely vulnerable Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip, constitute a change in the situation within the meaning of Article 76 of the Rules of Court. The Court is also of the view that provisional measures indicated in its order of March 28, 2024, as well as those reaffirmed therein, do not fully address the consequences arising from the change in the situation previously explained, thus justifying the modification of these measures. However, in order to modify its earlier decision concerning provisional measures, the Court must still satisfy itself that the general conditions laid down in Article 41 of the Statute of the Court are met in the current situation. The Court next turns to the conditions for the indication of provisional measures. It recalls that in its orders of January 26, 2024, and March 28, 2024, it concluded that, prima facie, it had jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the Genocide Convention to entertain the case. The Court sees no reason to revisit that conclusion for the purposes of deciding on the present request. In the order of January 26, 2024, the Court also found that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa under the Genocide Convention and for which it was seeking protection were plausible, namely the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts mentioned in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligation under the Convention. The Court saw no reason to revisit this conclusion in its order of March 28, 2024. The Court likewise sees no reason to do so for the purposes of deciding on the present request. It further considers that, by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought pursuant to the present request are aimed at preserving the rights claimed by the applicant that the Court has found to be plausible. The Court must next consider whether the current situation entails a risk of irreparable prejudice to the plausible rights claimed by South Africa and whether there is urgency. The Court recalls in this regard that it has previously concluded that in view of the fundamental values sought to be protected by the Genocide Convention, the plausible rights in question in these proceedings are of such a nature that prejudice to them is capable of causing irreparable harm. The Court recalls that on May 7, 2024, Israel began a military offensive in Rafah following weeks of intensified bombardment, and that as a result, approximately 800,000 Palestinians were displaced from Rafah as at May 18, 2024. The Court notes that senior United Nations officials have consistently underscored the immense risks associated with the military offensive in Rafah. For instance, on May 3, 2024, the spokesperson of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warned that an assault on Rafah would put, I quote, hundreds of thousands of people at imminent risk of death, end of quote, and would severely impact the humanitarian operation in the entire Gaza Strip, which is run primarily out of Rafah. On May 6, 2024, the United Nations Children's Fund indicated that about half of the approximately 1.2 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah were children, and warned that military operations therein would result in, I quote, the few remaining basic services and infrastructure they need to survive being totally destroyed. End of quote. The United Nations sources indicate that the aforementioned risks have started to materialize and will intensify even further if the operation continues. For instance, on May 8, 2024, the Director General of the World Health Organization stated the Al-Najjar Hospital, one of the last remaining medical facilities in the Rafah Governorate, was no longer functional due to the ongoing hostilities in its vicinity. On May 17, 2024, the World Food Programme warned that it had been able to access its warehouses in Rafah it hadn't been able to access its warehouses in Rafah for over a week, and observed that, I quote, "The incursion into Rafah is a significant setback to recent modest progress on access." End of quote. On the basis of information before it, the court is not convinced that the evacuation efforts and related measures that Israel affirms to have undertaken to enhance the security of civilians in the Gaza Strip, and in particular those recently displaced from the Rafah Governorate, are sufficient to alleviate the immense risk to which the Palestinian population is exposed as a result of the military offensive in Rafah. The court observed, for instance, that according to a statement by the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, on May 18, 2024, I quote, "The areas that peoples are fleeing to now do not have safe water supplies or sanitation facilities. Al-Mawasi, as one example, is a sandy 14-square-kilometer agricultural land where people are left out in the open with little to no buildings or roads. It lacks the minimal conditions to provide emergency humanitarian assistance in a safe and dignified manner." End of quote. The court observed that Israel has not provided sufficient information concerning the safety of the population during the evacuation process, or the availability in Al-Mawasi area of the necessary amount of water, sanitation, food, medicine, and shelter for the 800,000 Palestinians that have evacuated thus far. Consequently, the court is of the view that Israel has not sufficiently addressed and dispelled the concerns raised by its military offensive in Rafah. In light of the considerations set out in the preceding sections of the order, and taking account of the provisional measures indicated in its orders of January 26, 2024, and March 28, 2024, the court finds that the current situation arising from Israel's military offensive in Rafah entails a further risk of irreparable prejudice to the plausible rights claimed by South Africa, and that there is urgency in the sense that there exists a real and imminent risk that such prejudice will be caused before the court gives its final decision. The court concludes, on the basis of the aforementioned considerations, that the circumstances of the case require to modify its decision set out in its order of March 28, 2024. The court recalls that in accordance with Article 75, paragraph 2 of its rules, when a request for the indication of provisional measures has been made, it has the power under its statute to indicate measures that are not in whole or in part other than those requested. In the present case, having considered the terms of the provisional measures requested by South Africa and the circumstances of the case, the court found that the measures to be indicated need not be identical to those requested. The Court considers that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The Court recalls that in its order of January 26, 2024, it ordered Israel inter alia to, I quote, take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, end of quote. In the present circumstances, the Court is also of the view that, in order to preserve evidence related to allegations of acts falling within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, Israel must take effective measures to ensure the unimpeded access to the Gaza Strip of any commission of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or other investigative body mandated by competent organs of the United Nations to investigate allegations of genocide. The Court also considers that the catastrophic situation in Gaza confirmed the need for the immediate and effective implementation of the measures indicated in its orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024, which are applicable throughout the Gaza Strip, including in Rafah. In these circumstances, the Court finds it necessary to reaffirm the measures indicated in those orders. In so doing, the Court wishes to emphasize that the measure indicated in paragraph 51(2)(a) of its order of March 28, 2024, requiring, I quote, the unhindered provision at scale by all concerned of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance, end of quote, necessitates that the respondent maintain open land crossing points, and in particular the Rafah crossing. In view of the specific provisional measures it has decided to indicate, the Court considered that Israel must submit a report to the Court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month from the date of this order. The report so provided will then be communicated to South Africa, which shall be given the opportunity to submit to the Court its comments thereon. The Court recalls that its orders on provisional measures under Article 41 of the statute have binding effect and thus create international legal obligations for any party to whom the provisional measures are addressed. The Court underlined that the present order is without prejudice to any findings concerning the respondent's compliance with the orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024. In its orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024, the Court expressed its grave concern over the fate of the hostages abducted during the attacks in Israel on October 7, 2023, and held since then by Hamas and other armed groups, and called for their immediate and unconditional release. The Court finds it deeply troubling that many of these hostages remain in captivity and reiterates its call for their immediate and unconditional release. I shall now read out the operative part of the order. For these reasons, the Court, by 13 votes to 2, reaffirms the provisional measures indicated in its orders of 26 January 2024 and March 28, 2024, which should be immediately and effectively implemented. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Chardsworth, Brandt, Gomez-Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. 2. Indicates the following provisional measures. The State of Israel shall, in conformity with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and in view of the worsening conditions of life faced by civilians in the Rafah Governorate, A, by 13 votes to 2, immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah Governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that would bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shwe, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez-Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. By 13 votes to 2, maintain open the Rafah crossing for unhindered provision at scale of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shwe, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez-Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. C, by 13 votes to 2, take effective measures to ensure the unimpeded access to the Gaza Strip of any commission of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or other investigative body mandated by competent organs of the United Nations to investigate allegations of genocide. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shwe, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez-Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. 3. By 13 votes to 2, decides that the State of Israel shall submit a report to the Court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of this order. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shwe, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez-Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. I shall now call on the Registrar to read the operative part of the order in French.
Par ces motifs, la Cour, 1, par 13 voix contre 2, réaffirme les mesures conservatoires indiquées dans ses ordonnances des 26 janvier et 28 mars 2024 qui doivent être immédiatement et effectivement mises en œuvre. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Shwe, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolte, Mme Charlesworth, M. Brandt Gomez-Robledo, Mme Cleveland, M. Orescu Tladi, juge. Contre, Mme Sebutinde, vice-présidente, M. Barak, juge ad hoc. 2. Indique les mesures conservatoires suivantes. L'État d'Israël doit, conformément aux obligations lui incombant au titre de la Convention pour la prévention et la répression du crime de génocide, et au vu de la dégradation des conditions d'existence auxquelles sont soumis les civils dans le gouvernorat de Rafah, a, par 13 voix contre 2, arrêté immédiatement son offensive militaire et toute autre action menée dans le gouvernorat de Rafah qui serait susceptible de soumettre le groupe des Palestiniens de Gaza à des conditions d'existence capables d'entraîner sa destruction physique totale ou partielle. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Choué, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolt, Mme Charlesworth, M. Brand Gomez Robledo, Mme Cleveland, M. Orescu Tladi, juge, contre Mme Sebutinde, vice-présidente, M. Barak, juge ad hoc. B. Par 13 voix contre 2. Maintenir ouvert le point de passage de Rafah pour que puisse être assurée, sans restriction et à grande échelle, la fourniture des services de base et de l'aide humanitaire requis de toute urgence. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Choué, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolt, Mme Charlesworth, M. Brand Gomez Robledo, Mme Cleveland, M. Orescu Tladi, juge, contre Mme Sebutinde, vice-présidente, M. Barak, juge ad hoc. C. Par 13 voix contre 2. Prendre des mesures permettant effectivement de garantir l'accès sans entrave à la bande de Gaza à toute commission d'enquête, toute mission d'établissement des faits ou tout autre organisme chargé par les organes compétents de l'Organisation des Nations Unies d'enquêter sur des allégations de génocide. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Choué, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolt, Mme Charlesworth, M. Brand Gomez Robledo, Mme Cleveland, M. Orescu Tladi, juge, contre Mme Sebutinde, vice-présidente, M. Barak, juge ad hoc. 3. Par 13 voix contre 2, décide que l'État d'Israël devra, dans un délai d'1 mois à compter de la date de la présente ordonnance, soumettre à la Cour un rapport sur l'ensemble des mesures qu'il aura prises pour donner effet à cette ordonnance. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Choué, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolt, Mme Charlesworth, M. Brand Gomez Robledo, Mme Cleveland, M. Orescu Tladi, juge, contre Mme Sebutinde, vice-présidente, M. Barak, juge ad hoc.
Vice President Sebutinde appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the court. Judges Nolte, Orescu, and Tladi append declaration to the order of the court. Judge ad hoc Barak appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the court. The text of the order is available from today in typescript. It will be available shortly on the court's website. The printed text will be available in due course. As the court has no further business before it today, I declare the sitting closed.
Владимир Владимирович, уважаемые члены делегации. В начале мая на мероприятиях в Москве мы договорились встретиться и с участием членов правительств детально обсудить все интересующие нас вопросы, что мы и сделали только что в узком составе. Мы обменялись мнениями по наиболее чувствительным темам двусторонней повестки, от которых зависит состояние экономики, стабильное развитие наших государств. Мы также затронули международную ситуацию, обсудили варианты реагирования на риски и угрозы, возникающие по периметру наших границ. Несмотря ни на что, Минск и Москва сохраняют курс на усиление интеграции. Мы поддерживаем друг друга и будем поддерживать по всем направлениям, причем наши проекты уже вышли за пределы земной поверхности. Возвращаясь на Землю, обозначу ряд иных приоритетных направлений, требующих пристального внимания. Промышленность. В этой сфере планируем продолжить конкретную работу по реализации совместных импортозамещающих проектов в микроэлектронике, машиностроении, станкостроении, военно-техническом сотрудничестве. Иными словами, направлениях, обеспечивающих достижение целей технологического суверенитета и экономической безопасности наших государств. Все решения мы с вами, Владимир Владимирович, приняли, и правительство должны в сжатые сроки их реализовать. Прежде всего, необходимо оперативно завершить формирование единой промышленной политики союзного государства. От этого выиграют обе стороны. Многие наши конвейеры работают на компонентах друг друга. На законодательном уровне не должно быть никаких защитных мер от своих партнеров. Защищаться, как мы договорились, нужно от тех, кто ввел против нас санкции. И от тех, кто не способствует развитию экономик двух государств. Энергетика. От нее зависит ритмичная работа промышленности, стоимость конечной продукции. Необходимо окончательно согласовать условия поставок нефти и газа в Республику Беларусь. Мы обсуждаем это не первые годы. Сегодня Владимир Владимирович принял соответствующее решение. Я думаю, правительство в ближайшие дни в этом русле доработают эти соглашения. Мы детально разобрали все нюансы. Также Беларусь готова продолжить работу с российскими компаниями в сфере атомной энергетики. Опыт возведения белорусской АЭС открыл новые возможности для дальнейшего освоения этих технологий, подготовки квалифицированных кадров и даже совместного строительства таких объектов в третьих странах, за что, Алексей, мы вам очень благодарны, то, что вы подтягиваете наших специалистов до уровня российских знаний. Мы в этом направлении с удовольствием будем работать. Транспорт и логистика. Многое сделано, но потребности предприятий растут с каждым днем. Нужны более серьезные инвестиции в развитие железнодорожной инфраструктуры, обновление подвижного состава, увеличение провозных мощностей, финансовая поддержка наших авиаперевозчиков. Необходимы меры по повышению загрузки белорусских, российских аэропортов. Совместные проекты, которые сделают проще и доступнее сообщения между нашими регионами. Хотя уже в последнее время делается немало. Госзакупки. Заинтересованы теснее работать с российскими госкорпорациями. Пару недель назад на заседании ВС в Москве я поднимал этот вопрос в контексте госзакупок. Думаю, вы согласитесь с моим тезисом о том, что на пространстве союзного государства мы не должны себя ограничивать, закрываясь друг от друга на нашем общем рынке. Более того, ситуация показала, что полагаться в этом мире с точки зрения долгосрочного сотрудничества мы можем только на себя. Надеемся на активное подключение белорусских предприятий и организаций к реализуемым в России инвестиционным проектам. Очень много об этом в узком составе обсуждали эту проблему. Владимир Ильич много говорил об этом, как вместе работать, встраивая в общие цепочки наши предприятия. регионы. Только в последнее время этот потенциал регионов мы как следует оценили. Именно сотрудничество между нашими регионами обеспечило существенную прибавку во взаимной торговле. 27-28 июня в Витебске, Полоцке и Новополоцке пройдут плановые мероприятия в рамках очередного форума регионов. С большим удовольствием и вас, Владимир Владимирович, ваших коллег приглашаю на этот форум. Я думаю, ближе к этому событию мы договоримся в зависимости от графиков нашей работы. В завершение хотел бы пожелать успехов новому составу российского правительства. Уверен в сохранении преемственности в части приоритетного рассмотрения вопросов белорусско-российского сотрудничества. Я предлагаю в расширенном составе, если необходимо, согласовать подходы к этим и другим вопросам для принятия необходимых решений на уровне глав государств. Благодарю вас, Владимир Владимирович. Пожалуйста.
Уважаемый Александр Григорьевич, еще раз хочу поблагодарить от имени российской делегации за приглашение. Это естественная наша встреча. Мы регулярно встречаемся, но после выборов президента Российской Федерации и формирования правительства России, конечно, нужно было собраться вот в таком составе, широком составе, для того, чтобы обозначить ближайшие вехи нашего взаимного развития. Вы упомянули об инвестиционной деятельности. Полагаю, что это одно из наиболее важных наших направлений, имея в виду, что мы, конечно, должны делать упор прежде всего на приоритетные направления нашего сотрудничества. А этими приоритетными направлениями в первую очередь, конечно, являются высокие технологии и все, что с этим связано. Будущее, безусловно, за этим. У нас накоплен неплохой потенциал в этой сфере. Мы сейчас только в узком составе говорили о том, что самое главное для нас всех – это искать приоритетные направления в области этих высоких технологий и помогать друг другу развивать эти компетенции. Тем более, что в связи с так называемыми санкциями, а их в отношении России введено было больше, чем в отношении кого бы то ни было в мире, 16 тысяч разных, они создают определенные проблемы, безусловно, мы это видим, ощущаем, но они создают для нас определенные возможности для развития. Там, где мы утратили имевшиеся ранее компетенции, мы их быстрыми темпами восстанавливаем, а там, где их не было, они нам нужны, мы их создаем. И, конечно, создавать их можно было бы наиболее эффективным образом, объединяя наши усилия вместе. И одна из важнейших задач – искать эти области, искать эти направления сотрудничества, создавать необходимую всем нам синергию. Энергетика является действительно одним из важнейших направлений. Мы сейчас тоже об этом подробно говорили в узком составе. Есть определенные договоренности. Не сомневаюсь, что они все будут исполнены. И коллеги имеют определенные поручения доработать те вопросы, которые до сих пор являлись недоработанными. Это на самом деле детали, ничего существенного там нет. Ритмичная работа соответствующих предприятий в области ТЭКа, безусловно, будет обеспечена. Я согласен с Александром Григорьевичем и в том, что на сегодняшний день одним из безусловных приоритетов является логистика и транспорт. Имея в виду, что нам нужно восстанавливать и создавать новые цепочки поставок и между собой, и помогать друг другу для того, чтобы обеспечить бесперебойную работу наших предприятий, в том числе ориентированных на рынки двух стран и на рынке третьих государств, которые хотят с нами работать. Таких государств достаточно много. Александр Григорьевич не упомянул, но мы так вскользь затронули и еще одно направление взаимодействия – это сельское хозяйство. Это важнейшее направление. Беларусь здесь демонстрирует очень хорошие результаты, прежде всего по качеству товаров. Хочу обратить ваше внимание на то, что и мои российские коллеги это подтвердят. Российская сельхозпродукция пользуется заслуженным вниманием на российском рынке. У нас большое количество торговых предприятий открылось, где прямо говорится о том, на вывесках прямо написано, что товары из Беларуси пользуются большим спросом, имея в виду качество. Конечно, очень важным направлением нашего взаимодействия остается межрегиональное сотрудничество. Главы наших представительных органов власти уделяют этому особое значение. Мы с Александром Григорьевичем всегда поддерживали это взаимодействие и будем это делать дальше, потому что значительный объем товарооборота как раз сосредоточен на региональном уровне, в региональном измерении. Имеет огромное значение, когда не нужно с центра никого подталкивать, когда люди просто работают друг с другом, потому что это выгодно. И спасибо большое за приглашение, Александр Григорьевич. Мы, безусловно, воспользуемся этим и будем поддерживать это направление нашего взаимодействия. Есть еще одно направление, которое в современных условиях является чрезвычайно важным. Это обеспечение обороны и безопасности. Но это всегда вопросы, которые находятся в поле зрения президента Беларуси и моем. Мы всегда с коллегами с обеих сторон этим занимаемся, особенно в последнее время, это все актуально, имея в виду то направление, которое было избрано западным сообществом в отношении и Беларуси, и России, безусловной враждебности, попытки сдержать наше развитие, нанести ущерб нашему суверенитету. Ничего ни у кого до сих пор в этом отношении не получалось, и уверен, ничего не получится. Здесь мы чувствуем себя абсолютно уверенно, надежно и будем укреплять наше взаимодействие и по этим важнейшим направлениям деятельности. Есть еще одна важная сфера. Это строительство союзного государства. Коллеги на уровне правительства очень многое сделали в последнее время для того, чтобы создать условия для дальнейшей нашей кооперации и в сфере экономики, и в области политики. Здесь созданы хорошие инструменты для дальнейшего развития этих планов. Мы скоро будем отмечать юбилей создания союзного государства. И это тоже будет укреплять наше взаимодействие, которое, безусловно, пойдет на пользу развития наших государств и на пользу наших народов. Будет укреплять, прежде всего, это наша общая задача, укреплять благосостояние граждан Беларуси и граждан Российской Федерации. Я благодарю вас за внимание. Если есть необходимость, то готов предоставить слово своим коллегам.
Мы договорились с Владимиром Владимировичем, если кто-то хочет в этом формате высказаться, пожалуйста.